Okay, a little bit of a change from what you've been seeing before. This is Randy from All Roads Lead Home Genealogy and On the Roads to Discovering Your Ancestors, which is what we're going to be doing this evening. If everything works out fine, it's going to be a great show. Okay, so I'm right now, I'm waiting for Jen to homeschool the mom to join me. I am by myself, so if anybody is out there and they're making comments, I'll do my best to see them and to respond to them as I can. Let me get my devices open and determined who, what, where, and when is seeing what and everything else that goes with that. I do appreciate your giving me a moment here. I did share out to 3 of my own personal groups. Hopefully they went out with no problems. There may be a group or 2 that might say, no, you can't do that here. This is a private group. We're going to keep you from showing your video. And if that's the case, well, so be it. So here we are. We're in 2 different groups right now. I'm going to pause my audio. There we go. Okay. So who do we have waiting to talk to, for us to talk about this evening? Shane Melvin is a client of mine. He's been with me a very long time, and he just gave me some more homework to do of things that he wants me to find about his family. He himself did some work on his own, and his family did some work, and they want me to continue the process. So I'm going to try and see if the shares work, and I'm going to take it from there. Hey, so far so good. Okay, folks, here we go. We're looking at Captain George Croghan Whatley. Okay. He is or was the second cousin, 5 times removed, of my client down here in the highlighted blue, Douglas Shane Melvin. So he is quite a bit close. He is good. I would guess the SCV may consider him a bloodline. I'm not sure what their protocols are, but I see no reason why that. Here is a really neat portrait, painted, if you will, of him. Here's the original that the person first shared. Okay. And then someone went out and they made a little bit of improvement on it. So here is someone with their improvement. Did I get it here? So there is that improvement. So someone, you know what? I can do a bit better. And you know what? Someone said, you know what? I can do better than that. And they brought up with this one here, which I have now, which is this guy here, which I personally like. Okay, I personally like this image. I would love to find out what software they use so I can incorporate it for myself, but I really do like that one. But you know what? Someone said, I can do better than that. And here is the last one I'm going to show you. So there is that. So I'm not sure what software they used, but they have a watermark on it down here at the corner. So that'd be something that would deter me from using it in a professional business. But you know what? Handsome dude. Really was a handsome dude. And, you know, he was a lawyer, an attorney there in Alabama, where he lived and was raised, and actually joined the ranks of the Confederacy to fight and defend his land and his family from the northern aggressors. Okay. He fought in several battles, and I was fortunate enough to find a gentleman on YouTube who actually did a study of each individual battle throughout the war, but specifically, he did 2-minute, 3-minute video clips talking about the battles that our man was in. And hopefully I'll get them in order here. So he joined he was enlisted June 4th, 1861 in Alabama, and he died September 17th, 1862. And yes, he died a hero. Okay. It starts off with the Battle of Drainesville, December 20th, 1861. So let me pull that up here. So this one here is the Battle of Drainesville. Very well done. And I want to play it here for you folks so you get an idea. No sound, huh? So let me back out and try this again, folks. Thank you for letting me know. Let's try this again. Perhaps I forgot to click on. Yeah, I did. Sorry, guys. Let's start this over from again. Thankfully, it's only like a minute or two. So, David, is that better?
Welcome to Things You Should Know, Civil War Edition. Today you'll be talking about the Battle of Drainesville, located in Fairfax County, Virginia,
I just restarted,
on December
guys.
20th, 1861. On December 20th, 1861,
Good.
Confederate Brigadier General Jeb Stuart was in command of a company of artillery, cavalry, and 4 infantry regiments. His job was to conduct a foraging expedition for supplies. When he reached Drainesville around 1 p.m., he found the hamlet was occupied by Union Brigadier General Edward O.C. Ord and his 5 regiments, one of which was the famous Bucktails, a unit renowned for its marksmanship that was supported by 4 cannon deployed along the Georgetown Pike. Stuart's advanced cavalry pickets were quickly driven off by the Union force. Ord then began to lead his command west down the Leesburg Pike. Sometime after 2 p.m., Stuart, with the main body of his force, approached Drainesville from the south, whereupon he encountered the rear of the Union detachment. Ord halted his infantry and wheeled it around to meet the Confederate threat. Forming a line on the north side of the Leesburg's pike, he then deployed his artillery near the intersection. Stuart deployed his infantry on the south side of the pike and his artillery 300 yards from this Federal position. While the Confederate infantry was deploying, the 6th South Carolina mistook the 1st Kentucky for Union troops and opened fire. The Kentuckians quickly returned that fire. Hearing the sound of gunfire, the 9th Pennsylvania, a Union unit, charged across the turnpike but was quickly driven back. The artillery then began to duel, but owing to the strength of the Union position, the Confederate guns were quickly knocked out. Ord deployed his infantry in a skirmish line and sent it across Pike and Stuart, and the two sides squared off for nearly 2 hours. Sometime after 3 p.m., his wagons safely away and secure from capture, Stuart ordered a withdrawal. Ord pursued Stuart for half a mile, ensuring his line of retreat was safe, before breaking off the attack and returning to Langley. The following day, Stuart returned with reinforcements, but found no Union forces to engage. Ord had pulled out during the night. This would mark the first battle on the Eastern Front that the Union forces were victorious. The total estimated casualties was U.S. 71 men, the Confederates 230 men. Join us next week for the battle at Hatteras Inlet.
Hey, you gotta love the little modern day memes, or whatever you want to call them, memes, to indicate the various battles and results of the battles and so forth. So that I like the humor this guy has. Our friend, our ancestor, Captain Whatley, managed to survive this battle. He then went on to the siege of Yorktown, Virginia, in April 1862. So we'll take up from there. So let me get rid of this guy here. Bum, 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 ba-da. Here we go.
Welcome to Things You Should Know, Civil War Edition. Today we're going to talk about the Siege of Yorktown, located in York County and Newport News on April 5th through May 4th, 1862. On April 5th, Union General George B. McClellan's army, numbering over 120,000 men, came to Yorktown. There, they found Confederate General John B. Magruder's 11,000 men stationed behind prepared fortifications on the Warwick River. While preparing for the assault, Magruder attempted to deceive McClellan by moving his troops back and forth, making it appear as if they had far more troops than he really had. The actions of General Magruder paused McClellan as he decided, instead of forcing his way, he'd build the appropriate siege fortifications. During the construction and establishment of the Union siege fortifications, the Confederate reinforcements arrived with an additional 20,000 or so Confederate soldiers. The Confederates were still outnumbered by 120,000 to 35,000 at this time, but it gave the Confederates a better chance. Another concern was McClellan had not encircled Yorktown. The Confederates were slowly able to increase their numbers to almost 53,000 men in the time of McClellan's preparation. On April 16th, the Union forces commanded by Brigadier General William F. Baldy Smith was sent to stop the buildup of Confederate fortifications at Dam 1. The purpose of Baldy's assault was specifically only to stop the buildup of Confederate defensive works. Baldy himself was thrown twice from his horse, and accusations of drunk on duty were made, but disproven in a congressional inquiry. This attack resulted in an artillery bombardment at 8 a.m. in the morning, followed by an assault by Captain Harrington of the 3rd Vermont Infantry, crossing the dam and routing the defenders. The Union failed to take advantage of this success, though, and did not send reinforcements to the 3rd Vermont Infantry to break through the hole. Because of this, the 3rd pulled back across the dam, suffering a majority of their losses in this withdrawal. Losses were due to enemy fire and to drowning as they retreated. The Union held their position for 2 more weeks until their planned attack on May 6. They found, however, that the entire 53,000 Confederate troops had already slipped away a couple of days before, and McClellan was unable to pursue them quickly enough due to the long time it took for his men to prepare. The ending casualties for the battle included killed, wounded, and captured were 182 Union troops and 300 Confederate troops. Please join us next time on Things You Should Know, Civil War Edition.
Okay, so like I mentioned, Captain George Whatley, he was at this battle, and it's verified. The information I received from food3.com, yes, I'll give them a little nudge there. Food3.com indicates the battles that the individuals were participated in. So he was at this particular battle, managed to survive that. Okay, so, and folks, keep in mind, if you're keeping track of the dates, this guy was in a lot of battles in a very short period of time. So he went from one battle to the next with very little time in between to go to a Starbucks or a red light district for some fun. But anyways, I detract from the point here. So from there he went to where my grandfather was, Williamsburg. So let me get rid of this guy here and go to Williamsburg. Here we go. So he fought at Williamsburg, and it was uh, May 5th, 1862. Okay.
Welcome to Things You Should Know, Civil War Edition. Today we're going to talk about the Battle of Williamsburg, located in York County, Virginia on May 5th, 1862. The Union's march on Richmond had been going on for several months when Brigadier General Joseph Hooker's 2nd Division of the 3rd Corps led a Union advance and caught up with the rear guard of the Confederate Army. Confederate Major General James Longstreet took his rear guard and deployed his forces around Fort Magruder's slow to Union advance. Hooker's men attacked Fort Magruder, believing they might make it a quick victory, but the weather and the defiance of the Confederates pushed the Union attack back. In turn, the Confederates continued the battle and pushed forward in a counterattack on the left flank of Hooker's line. This attack continued until U.S. Brigadier General Philip Kearny's division arrived. In addition, U.S. Brigadier General Winfield Scott Hancock's 1st Brigade of Baldy Smith's division pushed hard against Cub Creek and continued the attack against the Confederate left flank. They secured 2 defensive positions to help pin the Confederates down. In response, Confederate Commander Longstreet called Major General Daniel Harvey Hill's men to push back against the Union. This included our old friend, Confederate General Jubal A. Early, who was very successful until he was wounded and the attack halted. The Confederate Army realized the precarious position it was in and began its withdrawal. The estimated killed and wounded and missing for the Union was 2,283, and the Confederates wounded, killed, and captured numbered 1,560. Join us next time on Things You Should Know, Civil War Edition.
Okay, so that was one that I would say we put into the win category for the South. You know, I've often said, and it doesn't really make much sense why they would do battle, 3-4 columns deep, 3-4 rolls deep, shoulder to shoulder. You're going. To me, that's a way of losing a large number of your soldiers, especially when the other side is lined up, and they're doing the same thing, 3-4 rolls deep, shoulder to shoulder. So, they shoot, you shoot, they shoot, you shoot, they shoot, you shoot, and by the time you're done, you might have a dozen men left from that, column of men. Wouldn't it make more sense to spread out, to hide behind hedges and trees and rocks and pebbles, for God's sake? At least it'd give you more protection than it would to stand there shoulder to shoulder. I do want to take a moment to say hi to everybody who's here. I'm going to say hi to Shane Melvin, who we are talking about his ancestor, Zach Rayla, David Nobar, and thanks, David, for the first heads up on the sound. I forgot that, first off, StreamYard doesn't like all the browsers, and depending on which one you use, you have to click sound or no sound, and I forgot to do that. So, David Nobar, thank you for pointing that out for me. We have with us, I just lost everybody. Okay. Well, I don't like that. Zach, Barbara Amons, thank you for joining us here today. His 3rd battle since joining up. Keep in mind, he joined up June 4th, 1861. And we're up to 1862, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. About a year later, he's already been in 3 major battles and managed to survive unscathed. Okay, so he goes on to his next battle, which is Seven Pines, Virginia, May 30th, 1862. Now, it indicates here that he was severely wounded prior to the next battle. So I'm going to assume he got injured here at Seven Pines. So let me get rid of you and go to 7 Pines. Here we go, folks.
Welcome to Things You Should Know, Civil War Edition. Today we're going to talk about the Battle of Seven Pines, located in Henrico County, Virginia, on May 31st to June 1st, 1862. Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston withdrew his army from the Virginia Peninsula, back towards the capital Confederacy, Richmond. Meanwhile, Union Major General George B. McClellan relentlessly pursued him with more than 105,000 men. By the end of the chase, Johnston held a position about 7 miles east of Richmond, setting up for the oncoming storm. U.S. Brigadier General Samuel P. Heintzelman's 3rd Corps and U.S. Brigadier General Erasmus Key's 4th Corps arrived just south of the Chickahominy River with more than 34,000 men. The remainder of McClellan's southern arm of his invasion force was kept back to protect vital supply lines. Confederate General Johnston saw a chance to take out part of McClellan's army by directing an attack on what appeared to be just a chunk of the army. Instead of attacking all 105,000 men, the units commanded by Heintzelman were only 33,000 men and a lot more vulnerable to being cut off and routed or destroyed. The order was for Confederate General James Longstreet to command the opening of the attack with 51,000 men. They were to march eastward in 3 columns and converge on 7 Pines. The 3 columns were commanded by Longstreet himself, Confederate Major General D.H. Hill, and Confederate Brigadier General Benjamin Huger. Longstreet was given orders to attack at 8 a.m. Shortly after 8 a.m. on May 31st had arrived, General Johnston noticed that Longstreet had not begun his attack and sent an aide out to find out what had happened. The aide was captured by the Union during a search for Longstreet. Nevertheless, Johnston had learned that Longstreet had changed his route and was 5 hours behind because of it. In addition, Longstreet never even ordered General Huger to attack, which means a third of Longstreet's forces weren't even there, reducing Longstreet's number to approximately 39,000 men from the original 51,000. General Hill began his attack at 1 p.m. across flooded fields, but was able to break the lines of the Union Brigadier General Silas Casey's 4th Corps, who were comprised of Green troops. It should be noted, though, that Casey's men did fight hard against the Confederates and inflicted heavy damage on them. The Union troops pulled back to their second line of defensive works at 7 Pines itself. It was at this time that Confederate General Johnston received a handwritten request from Longstreet to join in the battle. This was unexpected, but Johnston did move to aid his subordinate officer's request for help. He took with him 3 additional brigades to launch an attack on the Union left flank. It should be noted at this time that the Union Army Balloon Corps was on site with the Union Army and were commanded by Professor Thaddeus S.C. Lowe, who had established 2 balloon camps. Due to the weather, the aerostats, what the Union had named their scout balloons, the Washington and the Intrepid, did not launch until later in the day. However, when they launched, they observed the Confederate troops moving in formation and relayed that information back to General McClellan's HQ. In the evening of May 31st, Confederate General Johnston was shot in the right shoulder by a bullet, then a shell fragment from an artillery explosion hit him in the chest, making him fall off his horse. When he fell off his horse, he broke his shoulder blade and 2 ribs. He was evacuated back to Richmond, and General Gustavus W. Smith assumed temporary command of the Confederate Army. However, Gustavus was often sick and tended to be indecisive and was replaced later that night by the famous General Robert E. Lee. On June 1st, the Confederates renewed their attack on the Union, who had been able to call reinforcements in. The Union positions were not tenable, and eventually the Confederate forces withdrew around noon that day. Both sides claimed victory. McClellan's advance to Richmond was stopped, and the Confederate Army in North Virginia had to retreat back into Richmond. Final casualties on both sides were high. The Union suffered 5,031 casualties, consisting of 790 killed, 3,594 wounded, and 647 captured or missing. The Confederate Army suffered higher casualties for a total of 6,134 men, including 980 killed, 4,749 wounded, and 405 captured or missing. Please join.
Okay. I'm really enjoying this guy. He's short, concise. He gives you some really good graphics, really good video snippets, and of course the in between the modern day funny things, and that adds. It really does add to something of this nature, because something like this can get drab and get boring. Yeah, that's a history class. Okay, I'm back in high school. Okay, I get it, Randy. We go back in high school. Now what Randy's trying to do, and you'll see at the end, show honor to Shane Melvin's ancestor. So this is like a memoriam to his ancestor. Hey, Daryl, nice for you to join us. I'm not sure how much you've seen or missed, but we're about halfway through. I was hoping that Jen Woodruff would join me this evening, but she is out and about and has not yet gotten home, so I guess she is going to be a no-show this evening. So it's just me and my microphone. Okay, so again, like I said, 4-3 indicates that is at this point in time, or soon after, he was severely wounded. Okay, because it says he was severely wounded before Richmond, Virginia, June 27th, 1862, and he was absent from battle before Richmond, Virginia. So even though he was wounded, he was present at the next major battle. This guy is a diehard. Let me tell you, true Southern man. He wants to keep the North out, and he wants to do his due diligence. So we're going to, where are we at here? Here we go. So we're going to Battle of Manassas. Okay, no, not molasses like in pancakes and peanut butter, but Battle of Manassas. Okay, and the dates that he was there was August 30th, 1862. So this particular video would suffice for that time frame.
Welcome to Things You Should Know, Civil War Edition. Today we're going to talk about the Battle of Second Manassas, also known as the Second Battle of Bull Run, that occurred in Prince William County, Virginia on August 28th to the 30th, 1862. One thing to note, this battle will be split up into two videos in order to make the video small enough for the channel's purpose. That being said, these videos are only a surface glance at this gigantic battle. Now welcome to part 1 of the Second Battle of Bull Run. After the fighting over Manassas Junction had finished and a link-up between Confederate Generals Longstreet and Jackson had occurred, Union General Pope was moving forward to engage with Stonewall Jackson in an attempt to push him back. On the morning of August 28th, the first columns of Union soldiers under the command of Union Generals John P. Hatch, John Gibbon, Abner Doubleday, and Marsena R. Patrick had arrived. Using the Warrenton Turnpike, they found themselves near the Bronner Farm. Waiting not far from the farm was General Stonewall Jackson with his men. Jackson watched as the Union troops approached, and it is said that Jackson turned to his men and quietly said, "Gentlemen, bring up your men." These words would signal the start of one of the largest battles up to this point in the war. The Confederate forces immediately began an artillery barrage on top of the Union troops, forcing Union soldiers to seek shelter off the road. However, units commanded by U.S. Major General Irvin McDowell, all of whom were from Wisconsin and Indiana and would later be called the Iron Brigade, made themselves known. Instead of a wild run away from the artillery, they formed up into lines of battle and began to sweep across the field towards the Confederate fire. It was at the Bronner Farm that the Union and Confederate soldiers met in waves of fire and fury. The combat lasted a long 2 hours but had resulted in a stalemate as both sides stood less than 100 yards from each other. The fighting was ended by nightfall, and as the troops pulled back for the night, they left almost a third of their troops lying dead, wounded, and missing, a heavy toll for the first day of battle. Union Commander Pope believed that the Union forces had the upper hand, however, and ordered the rest of his army to attack the Bronner Farm the next morning. During the night, Pope moved up his artillery, and by morning, Confederate General Stonewall Jackson woke up to a massive Union artillery bombardment. In response, Jackson sent the divisions of Confederate Generals Ambrose Powell Hill, Alexander R. Lawton, and William E. Stark out along both flanks in preparation. However, the artillery of the Union did not signal a crush of Union troops attacking. Instead, General Pope spent the entire day utilizing a series of small attacks, poking at Jackson's defenses, but never committing fully. Some of these attacks included U.S. Brigadier General Milroy and Hooker's attack on the center of Jackson's line, with a follow-up later in the afternoon by U.S. Colonel James Nagle. All of these attacks partially broke Jackson's battle line, but were never followed up with additional troops to take advantage, and by the end of each attack, the Union troops had been pushed back. This changed for a short time when approximately 5 p.m. U.S. General Philip Kearny led his troops against Jackson's left flank. He
What
pushed
the
back
damn
Confederate
gal is
General
he
Hill's
wearing?
men out of Groventon-Sudley Road and back to what was called the Stony Ridge. The only reason it was stopped was because of one of our favorite generals, Confederate Brigadier General Jubal A. Early's brigade. Even so, at this time the Confederates were close to losing the bridge. For reasons unknown, Union General Pope never sent reinforcements to help Kearny push the remaining Confederates away from the bridge. This resulted in a fourth retreat of the day for the Union forces, thus signaled the end of the second day of battle. Join us next time for part 2 of the Second Battle Bull Run.
Okay. So we're getting a little bit hot and heavy here. We got some major battles going on, a large number of troops on either side. Want to say hi to Danny Lee, who joined us just recently. Hi, Danny. Great for you to join us. What we're doing here, Danny, if you haven't picked up on it, is we're giving a memorial, if you want to say, to Shane Melvin, who is a client of mine. I do genealogy, and he's a client of mine. And as I see really neat, interesting ancestors who have phenomenal stories to tell, I reach out to my clients for permission to do a little broadcast like this. So this evening, it's Shane Melvin's ancestor, Captain George C. Whatley, who fought for the 10th Alabama, and eventually he died he who finally died at Antietam. So we're going to the next part of the Battle of Manassas. And no, not molasses, although I do love molasses.
Welcome to Things You Should Know, Civil War Edition. Today we're going to talk about the Second Battle of Manassas, also known as the Second Battle Bull Run, that occurred in Prince William County, Virginia on August 28th to the 30th, 1862. Welcome back to Part 2, the Second Battle Bull Run. During the fighting of August 29th, Pope's focus had been completely on Stonewall Jackson and his forces. He had ignored General James Longstreet and his men in the Thoroughfare Gap, and didn't seem to notice that General Robert E. Lee himself had shown up for the Confederates with his own troops. Using this free time, Lee ordered Confederate General Longstreet to form up on Jackson's right flank, extending the Confederate line by more than a mile and allowing the Confederate troops to wrap around the Union lines, exposing the Union flank. On the morning of August 30th, Pope decided to press his advantage and attack what was known as the Deep Cut. He took more than 10,000 men and rushed it. The troops were unleashed fully after 3 p.m., and as they crossed the area, the Confederate soldiers, who were safely behind the railroad embankments, sent volley after volley of shot into the Union soldiers. To top this all off, Confederate artillery began to rain in on the Union troops. After 30 minutes of a bloodbath, the Union troops began pulling back with extremely heavy losses. Pope's failure at this assault doomed the rest of the battle. Seeing the success of the men, Commander Lee ordered Longstreet to sweep down and attack the Union flank. More than 30,000 Confederate soldiers swept down into the Union lines, sweeping all Union resistance until they reached Chin Ridge. Union General Pope, in a desperate bid to stop the collapse of his troops, threw together what he could to stop the Confederates, or at least to slow Longstreet down enough for him to pull the rest of his troops off the field. In a desperate bid, Pope kept throwing units into the ridge, doing anything he could to slow that push. Meanwhile, Longstreet kept calling up reserves to replace the men he was losing. Pope maintained his defenses until after 6 p.m. when he realized he'd been able to pull back to Henry Hill and form a better defense. Longstreet, believing he could push the Union lines and break it, threw his men into Henry Hill. The attack was too late, though, as darkness fell and the battle had ended. Pope and the Union had lost badly, in what was probably the worst loss of the war so far. He pulled his men back in the middle of the night and retreated to where McClellan's army had arrived to meet up with them. Pope was ordered a week later to give up his command and go to Minnesota and to fight the Native American tribes there. His war with the Confederacy was over for now, at least. The Confederacy ended this battle at the best position so far in the war. However, even with the Union suffering their largest defeat, they were still a threat. The total casualties were enormous for the time. The Confederacy suffered approximately 7,300 casualties, with a combined 1,100 killed, 6,200 wounded. The Union, who had the worst end of the stick, suffered 14,500 casualties over the 3 days, including 1,750 killed, 8,450 wounded, and more than 4,260 men captured or missing. The toll of this battle was just a signal of what was coming later in the war. Join us again next time on Things You Should Know, Civil War Edition.
They're not missing. They ran for the hills and said, "We're done with this thing." Okay, so our man here survived this battle. Okay, and I hate to say it, but his story ends soon. Um, at this point, does anyone have any questions? I can read comments. So if you have any questions about what we're doing here, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about them. I'll take a moment to let it look here and see if you guys are asking me any questions. Ask me no questions, I'll tell you no lies. Okay, so we will bring on to the next battle, which is the Battle of Sharpsburg, otherwise known as Antietam, September 17th, 1862. This is where our man George C. Whatley falls in battle.
Welcome to Things You Should Know, Civil War Edition. Today we're going to talk about the Battle of Sharpsburg, otherwise known as the Battle of Antietam, that occurred in Washington County, Maryland on September 17, 1862. Content warning. This video contains graphic images of the results of the Battle of Antietam, or otherwise known as Sharpsburg. This is including imagery of the dead bodies after the battle. Viewer discretion is advised. As a reminder, there's a reason many battles have two different names in the American Civil War. This was due to the fact that the Union based the name of the battle on some sort of geological identifying area, such as a close body of water or some sort of natural feature, whereas the Confederates would name the battle after the closest town or man-made landmark. This is one of the reasons why there's so much confusion about the names of battles during the American Civil War. In addition, the Battle of Antietam was very large and has a lot of recorded detail. This brief overview cannot adequately cover the battle, and I strongly urge, if you have an interest, to follow up with other sources. After a string of wins, Confederate Commander Robert E. Lee pushed his way into Maryland. His desire was to have a decisive battle to decide the fate of the Confederate States, and to push the fighting back into Maryland and out of the Confederate States themselves. This resulted in the Battle of Antietam. It was during this push that one of the copies of Lee's plan fell into Union hands, and allowed McClellan to react. McClellan was able to use these plans to dislodge Lee from the South Mountain. McClellan was also able to cause Lee to stop his attack into Maryland. This caused Lee to fight sooner with less troops than he had wanted, but the site of the battle would be at a place called Sharpsburg. The Union would call this place Antietam Creek, and with all this, Lee felt confident in his troops and the defensive position he had taken for this battle, even though he's outnumbered almost 2-1, with his troops numbering under 40,000 men, and the Union forces were more than 75,000. Lee's position forced McClellan to aim for the northern route of attack at Sharpsburg, to go through the more open area, allowing his troops to concentrate more effectively and avoid the difficult terrain. The start of the battle saw that the three bridges that crossed Antietam Creek itself were controlled. Two of them were under the Union control, while the Confederates held the third one. This allowed McClellan to form his troops up on the eastern side and prepare for his attack. To aid his push, McClellan moved up heavy artillery and grouped them on the other side of the bridge. He did that so he could rely on the creek itself to defend him if Lee were to counterattack. The Union started to fight on September 17th. The Union forces moved down to Hagerstown Turnpike and was commanded by Union Major General Joseph Hooker and his 1st Corps. Their aim was Dunker Church, a small whitewashed building belonging to the local German Baptists. Hooker's men numbered about 8,600. While the defenders were led by our very own Confederate Major General Thomas Stonewall Jackson. Him and his 7,700 men defended the church. When the Union troops entered the cornfield, an artillery duel between the Union and Confederate artillery batteries ensued. The artillery fire followed the troops and sprawled through both sets of woods and David Miller's farm that was in between them. Neither side was willing to be pushed back, so they both funneled men continuously into the meat grinder. The cost of just the first 5 hours of battle was more than 13,000 men killed and wounded. Communication was poor later in the morning as Union troops inadvertently attacked the center of the Confederate forces at a place called Sunken Road. This name would change after this battle to Bloody Lane, as a result of Edwin Summers' division's constant attacks forced down this lane, but were repulsed each time by Confederate defenders. Unfortunately for the Confederates, there was a misunderstanding in orders that commanded them to abandon Bloody Lane, even though they were situated in an excellent position. This resulted in a hole in Lee's line, a weak point that could have been taken advantage of by the Union. Unfortunately, Union General McClellan did not take advantage of this, and he refused to push the attack again. This allowed the Confederates to eventually recover and strengthen that point. The final portion of the battle occurred under Union General Burnside, who had earlier begun a diversionary attack on Lee's right flank. The crossing the Antietam Creek Bridge did not go successfully at first, and only gained the bridge after hours of fighting. It is now known as Burnside's Bridge after that fight. Eventually, Burnside moved his men fully across the creek and began to move on Sharpsburg. The Confederates had fewer troops to defend, as Lee had been using those troops as reinforcements on his left flank. As all seemed lost for the Confederate Army, Confederate General A.P. Hill arrived from his attack on Harper's Ferry in time to drive into General Burnside's flank, smashing the Union forces back and ending the fighting as dark overtook them. The morning of September 18th showed Union Commander McClellan refusing to attack Lee's forces again. This resulted in an unexpected and resounding victory for the Confederates as McClellan pulled his men back. The final casualties were brutal. The Confederate losses were high, with approximately 1,570 killed, 7,750 wounded, and 1,020 captured or missing, for a total loss of approximately 10,340 men. Meanwhile, Union losses were higher, with 2,110 killed, 9,550 wounded, and 750 captured, for a total approximate loss of 12,410 men. Please join us again.
Wow, that's a lot of loss. We're down to the very last thing I want to share with you. Just 1 second here. I got a gentleman here who just came in at the tail end. This is the first I've seen his shall we say his question, and I apologize if he was asking beforehand. Let me do something here. Da, 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 da. I need to find. Hey, cat, don't do that. That might not go so well. Dirk, if you go to my posts, my group, my profile here, Randy Rhodes, that's where it's being broadcast. Okay, and I'm about like 5-10 minutes from ending this, so you can always catch on rerun. So we're down to the end. I wanted to try and do this in, so we say in like a memorial of cat. You got to move. I need to see my screen here. Sorry, cat. What is it about cats and computers? So what I'm going to try and do here is combine two things. That's going to be that one first. Then you go back down here. And I hope this comes off well, because I really did. It worked well in, shall we say, in production. So hopefully it does well here. I got to pull this out. This here is the site where all the names and the soldiers who fought there are listed, and I hope I can do this well for you. Let's skip you.
'Twas on the field of Antietam
Enjoy it.
where many's a soldier fell. Is where occurred the story which now to
Can you guys hear the music? Let me know.
The dead lay all around me, we all together lay, for we had had a fearful fight upon the field that day. And while I lay there musing upon
Can you guys
the
hear the
cold
music?
damp ground, My knapsack for a pillow, my blankets wrapped around. And while I lay there musing, I heard a bitter cry.
Can you guys hear the music? Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure.
It was, Lord Jesus, save me and take me home to die.
These are names of all the soldiers who
He
fought
said
there.
I was the eldest brother just 3 years ago, when I left my home and kindred for the state of Ohio, not finding any other work to which I might apply. I bound myself apprentice, my fortune for to try. Well, I did not like my master, he did not use me well. So I fixed a resolution not long with him to dwell. And with this resolution from him I ran away. And I started then for New Orleans, and cursed be the day. Well, it was there I was conscripted and sent into the field, not having any other hope but I might die or yield. And so with many another boy I marched away that night, and this has been the 10th time that I've been
10 times in battle. 10 times in battle for that
I
guy.
thought the boy who shot me had a familiar face, but in the battle's fury 'twas difficult to trace. I thought it was my brother Jay, if him I could but see. I'd kiss him and forgive him and lay me down to die. Well, I quickly ran unto him and heard his story o'er. It was my long-lost brother who lay weltering in his gore.
So
I
brother
spoke of
against
loved
brother.
ones
You get
left
that?
behind and soothed his fevered brow. And he whispered, my dear brother, I can die happy now. Then quickly, like a slumbering babe, his fluttering eyelids closed. I watched him sink with shortening breath to death's long last repose. So with many's the tear and sad farewell, I scooped a narrow grave, and now he sleeps beneath the sod by Antietam's rippling waves.
And folks, here is the name of his ancestor, Company G. And you're here somewhere. I didn't know I was going that slow through this. I wanted to try and keep the list going according to the music, but I was going obviously too slow. Here he is. Whatley George C. killed in the Battle of Sharpsburg, Maryland. So, folks, that is it for the show. I was hoping that Jen would be here, because at least we would have some conversation going back and forth that would extend another 10 minutes. But Shane, I hope I did your ancestor justice by producing this particular broadcast. And I really appreciate all you who showed up today and who spent some time with me. I want to add it on a happy note. So here we go. If it works. Well. can hear it, but it's not very loud. Can you folks hear that music? Why am I so quiet? Well, I apologize for that. I wanted to end it on a happy note, but that is really quiet. Unless I'm going deaf, which is always very possible. So, folks, this is Randy from All Roads to Freedom Genealogy and On the Roads to Discovering Ancestors, saying I hope I had a good show for you folks, that you saw something, you learned something, you appreciate what I've done. It took a lot of time finding all this stuff and putting it together. And I certainly hope that, Shane, I did your ancestor justice by remembering him and his gift of life for fighting for the South. So, people, have a great rest of your evening. Take care.